Welcome to this week's edition of the Old Paratrooper Podcast. But before we get started, I want to tell you about our new sponsors, Veterans for Veterans. If you served after 1987 and your hearing's taken a knock from your time in the forces, these are the people to speak to. They've helped thousands of veterans like us claim compensation for tinnitus and hearing loss. They're ex-military themselves, so they genuinely get it.
It's free to check if you qualify, and the claims are no win, no fee. To get started, click the link in this video or visit veteransforveterans.co.uk.
Good morning and welcome to today's podcast. Today's guest, former London Brigade firefighter who attended the tragic Grenfell fire and former contestant on season 6 of SAS WDW, Ricky Nuttall. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Thanks for having me on the show.
See, I told you, I got through that with it. I think I said, welcome, brother, but I said, welcome, Buddha. So you're not religious, are you? No, nice one, pal. Thank you for taking the time to come on. I've seen you on a couple of podcasts. As soon as I saw you, I was like, I've got to have Ricky come on mine. Obviously, as we talked about, you know, I'm a former firefighter. You're a former firefighter. And I've wanted to talk about the Grenfell Tower for a long time, but I've been almost not been able to because of the politics with the fire service. I'm sure that's something we will come on to moving forward. But yeah, the floor is yours, Ricky. I like to start at the beginning, talk about where you grew up, what you were like as a kid, and ultimately what led you down the path into the fire service and beyond. Yes, over to you. Where are you from?
Fine. My dad was actually in the REME. We joined there, I think he joined at 17. He was posted to Germany first. It was in Munster where my older brother was born. Then a year later was posted to Northern Ireland in 81. So sort of fairly in the thick of things over there. So I was born in Ballymena in County Antrim. We stayed there. I think I left there when I was 1. And then he got posted to Cyprus, which is a nice cushy little posting out there. I loved it out there. I remember, even though I was quite young, I surprisingly remember quite a bit about it. And I've always I don't know if you have this with anywhere or if you moved about as a kid at all, but I have a real affiliation with that little island. Like, I absolutely love it. I love the food. I love the culture. It sort of became a little part of me while I was out there. Unfortunately, my mum, so she had my older brother and myself at this point, and then she got pregnant again with what was going to be our third, and she miscarried. And because my mum and dad were quite young, they were only sort of 20 at this. I think she struggled with the loneliness of that moment. Dad was away quite a bit, or certainly out quite a bit. And she was led to believe that she would be better off moving back to England where she'd get more support, be closer to family. You know, I think she just struggled a bit with it now. I think at the time, you know, she was probably deemed a bit selfish or a bit harsh for removing the kids from the father sort of thing. But I think nowadays we'd probably look back at that and say, you know, she'd been through a bit of trauma and she was struggling with the mental health, to be honest. But back then it wasn't really a thing. So she just packed up, said to my dad, I can't stay. You know, they'd been arguing loads, and moved back to England. She'd actually got pregnant again at that point. So she was carrying my younger brother, Daniel, moved back to England. My dad then stayed for a period of time, but managed to buy himself out early from the REME. He flew back to try and salvage things. And again, young people, 2 kids, 1 on the way. It was all a little bit carnage and ultimately didn't work out. My dad then met someone else. My mum met someone else. He became my stepdad. Right. So he was CID in the British Transport Police. You would expect him to be a good man. In some ways he was, but he had been raised in a very strict household where he was hit with things rather than threatened. And so he was the same with us. And so from, you know, fairly early on, in their relationship, he was quite violent with us, and that violence progressed throughout the time that we were still living there. So from about 5 to 12, it was, if we spoke during a film, we'd have to go upstairs, get a pair of his socks from the drawer, roll them up, stick them in our mouths, and then stand in the corner of the room staring at the two corners of the wall while the rest of the family sat there and watched the rest of the film. I couldn't tell you how long we were there for. You know, I was a kid. It felt like forever. May have been 15 minutes. Could have been an hour. I honestly couldn't tell you. But the stuff that went on with him was just constant. And it was the fear of him that I think was the hardest thing. I was petrified of him. He had a pair of leather slippers, and he wrote my name on the bottom of one and my older brother's name on the other one. And if we were naughty, he would make us go upstairs, search for his wardrobe to find our slipper, bring it to him. And then it would be trousers and pants down over his knee, and he would hit us repeatedly as hard as he could with this leather slipper. And that could have been for not finishing our dinner, you know, or something like that. It was never, this was never, you know, you've beaten a kid up in school or you told a teacher to do one. You know, it was never anything that I would look at and go, well, that's, you know, fairly serious. It was being kid, you know, you're being a kid, and that was the end result. So I think this led me to sort of start to grow with an unhealthy fear of violence, to the point where when you get that adrenaline surge, some people love that adrenaline surge. Something's going on, you're like, you know, fuck yeah, this is happening. It makes me feel horrific. It makes me feel physically sick.
Okay.
And then one day, we went to visit my dad for the weekend, and some other stuff had happened at home, which meant that our little sort of secret, if you like, couldn't be kept secret anymore. There were some obvious injuries on my brother. My dad asked what had happened, and he knew we weren't happy there, but we then waited till he got far enough away from home to where we thought he wouldn't turn the car around, go back, and his stepdad's head off, and told him everything that had been going on. And he drove us straight to a police station, and we pressed charges against my stepdad, and I never went home. So overnight at just, I think I just turned 12, overnight I left my very good, quite posh grammar school in Kent, all of my friends, everyone, literally everybody I knew, and now lived in Wandsworth in southwest London. And my dad gets into the school quite quickly. I went to a school called Ernest Bevin, a bit better now, I believe. At the time, certainly it was a very well-known school for not being a good school. And I'd literally gone from being in a school where there was one Asian kid to a school where I was one of 6 white kids in my year. You know, it was a complete culture shock. It was a complete change of environment. And once again, it was a really violent school. You know, there were fights constantly. Day one, I had a fight with a kid on my class because someone told him that I cussed his mum, and me being the posh twat that I was like, I don't even think I know your mum. You know, it was that sort of thing, you know. I was so out of my depth. So it was tough. It was a tough 6 months. And, you know, again, at the time, as we always see kids, and we place such huge demands on children, and, you know, COVID being the last real big demand we put on children, where we just go, okay, well, the world has changed drastically for everybody. And everyone struggles. All the adults talk about, oh, this is tough, that stuff. Oh, I've struggled with my mental health, blah, blah, blah. What about the kids? Yeah, they're working from home as well. Well, who's checked in on them? Yeah, they're fine. They've lost all of their friends. They've lost all of their structure. They've lost all of their schooling. And then one day everyone just goes back to school. We go, right, off you go to school again. You know, kids have a way of just cracking on and getting on with stuff. But as I learned later on in life, it doesn't mean that stuff hasn't affected you or doesn't leave what I would call a watermark. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The kids, they're very resilient, but we now know that a lot of stuff that happens with kids, sort of childhood trauma, and that manifests itself later in life, and it's usually something that triggers that off. I can relate to some of the stuff you're saying there. So yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a difficult one, especially for kids at that age, because they it's difficult to spot, isn't it? Because they just crack on, like you said. They just kind of very resilient, crack on, and it's hard to spot. And you're right with the COVID thing. I think it's set sort of a certain generation of children behind. That, and you can see it in their development, in their social skills. They're about 2 or 3 years behind because of the whole lockdown thing and everything else. But no, like, thank you for talking about your childhood there. I mean, obviously, it's not an easy thing to talk about. It sounds like it was pretty horrendous growing up in that environment. But I suppose the positives to take away from that is, one, you're able to talk about it now and share your experiences. But two, you got away from it before you were, when you were 12, it could have gone on for another couple of years. So I try and always take positives away, and hopefully you have as well from that,
Yeah, well, I think the two main positives I've taken away from it are, one, you're right, we got out early enough, because from 12 to 15, that violence changes quite significantly, because I would have reached an age where I would have started fighting back. And then you're talking about a next level of violence, because then you're talking about a man, beating up a young adult, or a young adult beating up a man, potentially, depending on what way it goes. So I think it was good that we got out when we did. The other thing as well is that I've always been quite an emotional kid. From as far back as I can remember, I've never been afraid of having a bit of a cry or letting that out. My older brother went down the let it out through violence route. I went through the let it out through poetry route. And one thing I would say is that the other thing I got from those times is, later on in life, when I've started having poetry published and sort of putting it out there, I've realized that a lot of those life experiences can now benefit people in this day and age. And as an example, I wrote a poem about my stepdad and how I felt, and it's called The Key in the Lock. And the NSPCC have used this in some of their advertising campaigns a few years back. And it was literally about, the whole poem was about how I felt when I heard his key go in the front door, and how I would start to panic, and how that, what that looked like, and how that felt for me in those moments. It's one of my favorite things I've ever written, because it's got a nice flow to it and it's very visceral. And, but yeah, anyway, it's nice that I've been able to turn some of those experiences into things that can help people now, is ultimately what I'm saying. And
yeah, no, absolutely. Do you have that poem with you, or can you recite that poem?
it's on my phone. Yeah, I can do it later if you want.
Yeah, well, for the purpose of the viewers and that, I think I'd personally like to hear it, and I know everyone can look for it and read it, but I think it'd be really nice and a lot more meaningful coming from yourself. So yeah, at some point we'll record a little bit and I'll put that out and attach it into this. Okay.
So yeah, so then school. I managed to find my way through school through humour mostly. I was a mouthy little git. But that sort of made me, that allowed me to find my place within an environment I didn't feel I belonged in. I found a little place of belonging, I guess. I started to do my A-levels, stayed on at the same school, started to do my A-levels. And the weird thing about environments is that sometimes the bits about the environment you don't like are also the bits that make that environment exciting. And when those bits are removed, the environment is no longer fun. And what I found weirdly was, whilst it was a scary place for me to be in school, once I'd started A-levels and the majority of the wrong uns had left the school felt really boring. It felt safe, and that felt boring. And again, looking back now, I realized what I was starting to see at that point is the start of this trauma pattern where you mistake trauma for excitement, and you mistake peace for boredom. And So I got halfway through not even halfway through the first year of my A levels. My older brother started to work already, and he was bringing home, coming home in a suit, new trainers and stuff. And I was like, that's like way more fun than being at this boring school doing my A levels. So I was doing maths, physics, and English, good A levels. And went home one day and just said to my dad, don't know if I want to go to uni. And he said, well, is there any point doing your A levels then? And I went, probably not. And he went, well, you're not sitting around the house doing nothing. I said, I get a job. And he went, yeah. And that was pretty much my transition from doing some very good A levels to working for a bailiff company as my first ever job.
No way. Yeah, but the thing is, it's like I say it all the time about education. It's not the be all and end all. I know so many people that left school with no qualifications. I like to think I'm a kind of an example of that to a certain extent. I've got 0 qualifications, but they put so much onus on the school system, don't they? That it's the be all and end all, and yet it's, you see kids getting themselves in such a state when they fail the GCSEs, and they think it's that we've seen suicides sadly, of young teenagers that have failed the GCSEs and can't handle it. And that is another message that I think we need to get out. The school's not that important. People do succeed without academic qualifications. And I think the life skills, communication skills, the ability to talk to people and just communicate, be kind, those sort of things, they'll take you a long way further than academic qualifications. Do you probably agree with that one?
Yeah, I do. When I go into, we'll come on to talk about this later, I'm sure, but when I go into schools and deliver keynotes and stuff for these children, I often talk to them about what I call the system, and I say the system needs 2 things. It needs good school results and it needs people to fail. That's the only way the system works. Because if everyone gets good school results, and if everyone becomes a lawyer, who's going to be a bin man? Who's going to sweep streets? Who's going to clean offices? Who's going to do the more menial jobs that you're not going to find a qualified lawyer doing? Or a qualified doctor doing. The only way the system works is if some people are undereducated and don't do as well, which then when you go, well, all the onus is put on the schooling system, well, then it stands to reason that the government are going to underfund some schools, going to make sure some rubbish teachers are teaching in them, and going to make sure that we have a surplus of kids growing up into adults that don't have qualifications and that have been led to believe that they have a ceiling, so that they go, well, that's the best I can do. And then they go into those jobs. Great, we've got clean streets, we've got empty bins, we've got clean offices, we've got people working in pubs and bars. And by the way, I'm not saying there is anything wrong with doing any of those jobs. I would do any one of those jobs rather than be unemployed. Absolutely. So this isn't me saying, everyone that does those jobs has failed in life. What I'm saying is that the system needs people to fail the ideal that is set out. The ideal is you get all A's in your GCSEs, all A's in your A levels, go to university, get a degree, with honours. That's what the system says you should be aiming for. But the system needs you to do less than that as well. It needs lots of people to do less. So I always say to these kids, don't put too much emphasis on school. All school does really, yes, it does give you a lot of information. There are subjects that people care less about in school. They always focus math and English, science. And I think, well, history teaches you more about life and how the world works than any of the other subjects. When you start looking into wars, one war leads into the next, If you work backwards, trying to find out, well, why did that war start? Okay, well, if that war started then, what started that? Before, what started that? And you end up all the way back in ancient Egypt. You know what I mean? That's literally how history works. You can track the fall of man through all of this stuff. So subjects in school that you should be really invested in and should be really pushed aren't really that pushed. And so kids get to the end and they go, oh, well, I'm not going to meet this standard. But that standard only exists because it makes the school look good. Standard only exists because they're saying, if you don't do this, then you're a failure. Oh, well, if you're a failure, this is where you go. So, I agree with you. The pressure children are under to do well in exams and stuff is absolutely unreal. even more so during COVID. And, you know, during COVID, they had very little support. So I'm not surprised we've got a generation of kids now that are hurt by words. Sorry.
Oh, I get you. I know. I understand where you're coming from. It is, and you know, I think we've created a monster in certain aspects, and you've created generations there that perhaps don't have the resilience that are needed for everyday life. Is probably how best way I could describe it without offending someone with my words. Funnily enough,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. That
but
is a good
yeah,
word for it.
but so bailiff, interesting first job.
Do you know what? Again, learnt a lot. Once again, thrust into another violent world. I actually applied for the job because it said legal company in the advert in the paper.
Okay,
I
it's a
was
good way
like,
of
oh,
putting
I'm interested in law. That'd be great. And I went along. I started off in the office doing some data input stuff, and then moved out onto the road as a bailiff, became a certificated bailiff for a short period of time, upon which, at which point I decided this is a miserable job. This is a really miserable job. And I thought, what do I want to do? What do I want to do with my life? And this is, again, you know, it was a very different world back then. I went to the library and spoke to someone down there, and they said, oh, there's like a careers section. And I had a little look through the careers section in the library, and I stumbled across this Commandos book. And I was like, Commando? That's cool as fuck. What is a commando? So, and it's Royal Marines Commando. And so I looked into that, and it was like, well, you can go down to any of your local TA centres and speak to a recruitment officer. And right, do it. So I went down to the TA centre in Croydon. It's a warrant officer down there. I can't remember her name. She was really lovely. She said, sit down there. Which she said, well, what are you interested in? I said, I'm interested in the Royal Marine. And she said, sit there and I'll be straight back out. Wait there. And whilst I did, I don't know if anyone else listening would have ever had this experience, but there was another guy that was there. I don't know who he was, in uniform. And he came out and he sort of had a nose, and he was like, you thinking about the Marines, are you? And I said, yeah. And he went, ever thought about, I can't remember what regiment he said. It wasn't Marines, it wasn't Paras. He said a different regiment. I can't remember what it was. Ever thought about such and such? And I sort of looked at him, and I thought, he's trying to poach me. Trying to poach me from the Marines. And I went, no, not really. And he said, oh, would you consider it? And without even thinking, I just said, well, I just sort of thought, if I'm going to get shot at, I might have to do it with the best people around me rather than being a different, you know. And he sort of looked a little bit hurt and went, right, fair enough. And he just marched out again. And then this lady came back and she said, right, come through, and started my application. And then I went down to Lympstone to do my PRMC. And, you know, it was the first time I'd really sort of been away from home properly. First time I'd had any involvement with the military in any way, shape or form. I never did cadets or anything like that, you know. I remember my dad being super proud of me. I went down with a little backpack on and had my little military train travel pump thing that you get given. And he was, I remember when I got my first one of them. And, yeah, well, went down there, failed. In a nutshell, failed the course. I failed on the run. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it was a 3 miles and 18-minute run you have to do. Your basic. I did everything else. I did the 10.5 and oblique test, sit-ups, the circuit training, the bottom half of the Tarzan assault course in under, I think it was in under 4 minutes or something. Did all of that stuff, got all of that done. Just didn't have the lungs for the run. I had some, it sounds piss weak, but I had some pretty bad blisters on my heels from the day before in the bottom field. Which is partly our own fault because none of us marched down there properly. We assumed if we were getting stuff wrong, we'd be told. Well, we were told, but we were told whilst we were face down in the mud on the bottom field being screamed at by a corporal. So, you know, we all sort of lined up, and then someone started chatting on the way down to the bottom field, and no one got told to shut up. So everyone just started talking, and he went ballistic out when we got to the bottom. So we had a bit more work to do down the bottom maybe than we would have before. Yeah, blisters, fitness, started to run. I think I got about halfway through, and that van that was following behind me was getting ever closer, and the group in front of me was getting further away. And again, I was expecting at that point to have an arm around my shoulder and someone go, "Come on, mate, you can do it. Come on." Take some deep breaths in, have a break a minute, we'll catch up. That, and then people will be listening to this laughing, going, "It's the Royal Marines, mate, not fucking, anything else." But obviously they don't. They just go, "You sit, get in a van," and that's it. So I was like, right, okay. So we got in a van. I've stayed down there for the rest of the time, finished everything else. They didn't take me for my interview because the corporal that was there said that, we like you. We think you'd really fit in, but you haven't upped the course, so there's no point taking you in for the interview bit. Please do come back. We'd like to see you back. Go away, work on your fitness, come back. So I got back home and I'd already applied for the fire brigade as well. And then the fire brigade I just never went back. I never went back for another PRMC. The fire brigade application sort of rolled through. And then I started work for the London Fire Brigade, February 1st of Feb 2005, for the doors at Suffolk Training Centre. Started my career in the fire brigade.
Yeah, look, I always say these things are meant to be. They're kind of fate. Things happen for a reason. And you ended up in the fire service and not the Royal Marines, which in my book, that's probably a good thing. With the Royal Marines being arch enemies of the paras, I think you made the right decision. I'll get some criticism for that comment, but yeah, I'm all for it. But no, look, it is what it is. You went on to have a very long career in London Fire Brigade. Just how was the training? Because I joined the Fire Brigade a lot later years than you, maybe sort of 7-8 years later than you. So, we talk about generations and stuff. How was the firefighting training course back then? And I'll talk to you about stations and bars and stuff as well, whether they were in London Fire Brigade after. But yeah, the training course, how was that?
Honestly, looking back on it now, at the time, it was just pressure, pressure, pressure. There was never a day when you weren't under pressure. And I'm sure it's no different to the military in that sense. They're training you to be able to work under pressure. So they're going to train you in that same environment. I remember being there at the time and thinking to myself, bloody hell, this is a lot. This is a lot. They're throwing information out. There's exams all the time. You're learning something new every single day and having to retain all of what you learned the days before and the weeks before. And at the time, it was 4 months. You don't get long. It was 4 months, start to finish, having never seen a fire engine, to knowing where everything is on a fire engine and walking through the doors of my first fire station. 4 months is not long to go from, as we used to say, 0 to hero. 0 to hero in 4 months. It was a lot. But looking back on it now, fucking loved it. It was so much fun. And you get to do some, you get to do some pretty goosey shit in the fire brigade, There's a lot of equipment. There are a lot of different disciplines you can go into. And yeah, I had an absolutely great time. I got some brilliant stories from training school where people got things wrong. Turned up late because they'd been out on a raz the night before, and all sorts of different stuff that shouldn't be going on that went on. Some brilliant stories. And that was my first real experience of what camaraderie is, proper camaraderie. I still talk to, one of the guys is dead now, but other than that guy, Danny Haxton, rest his soul, other than him, I still see and talk to all the other guys on the course. 22 years or whatever it is later. So, made friends for life in 4 months.
Yeah, you do. These sort of organisations, the fire service, the military, and that they bond you because you're going through hardship, and those friends do become friends for life in those, because you put on unbelievable pressure, and that's the idea. You pressure, so that when you do rock up and tip up to a house fire at 2 o'clock in the morning when it's coming out of every window, you're on it. And you're calm, you know what you're doing. You're drilled to death on the drill yard because you know exactly what you're doing. So yeah, you've gone through the training course, 4 months, and you've rocked up at your station. I always talk about that part again, very daunting. How was your experience in rocking up at that station? You know, here we are as firefighters, 2005, 2006, just like, wow.
Yeah, so my first station was White Watch Hillingdon. Now, I was very lucky to have had a welcoming bunch of lads, because they were very welcoming with me. I was even luckier that, this is hard, but I was lucky that there was a guy that was 5 weeks ahead of me at training school, also got Hillingdon White Watch. He's a nice guy, but he's a guy that rubs people up the wrong way. So by the time I got there 5 weeks later, he's already pissed off the whole station. So I got there and I was like the golden child. I got a real easy run of it because, you know, he'd already pissed people off. But it is daunting. You're right. You know, the guys on my watch, majoritively, not all of them, but majoritively, they were guys that had been born on that ground, grown up on that ground, gone to school on that ground, lived on that ground, and now were stationed at that station on that ground. And that was their only ever posting. So to say these guys were embedded in the area is an understatement. You know, these guys knew every road. They were really experienced, but they were also 30 years, some of them into the fire service, straight white guys. So they were also racist, homophobic, sexist. And that's just not me. You know, I've got a very mixed ethnicity family. I've grown up in London where it's very mixed ethnicities, and some of my best mates, you know, were all over the place. And so, you know, my mum's a woman and I've got gay friends, you know, it's just not a bit of me. And I don't mind the bands are placed the right way, but that's not what they were. They were just derogatory. And so within the first year of me being at that station, I was quite unhappy. I ended up having a fight with the mess manager, like a physical fight with the mess manager. And the governor spoke to me and he said, look, I know you're not happy here and you wanted to move. If you're entitled to press charges against this guy, he'll probably be sacked. He's got, you know, a couple of years left. He'll get his full pension. If he gets sacked, he leaves it. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't want to be spiteful. Maybe I should have been, but I didn't want to be spiteful. That's not me. I said, I'll tell you what, just get me moved. I don't want to be here. And we'll say no more about it. So they moved me to Knightsbridge Red Watch. And then I was in the heart of London, driving fire engines up the wrong way in bus lanes along Piccadilly and round Leicester Square. And fuck me, it was amazing. It was an amazing watch. Real good bunch of guys. It was just brilliant. I had such an amazing time at Knightsbridge. I had some good fires. Soho was the busiest station in the UK. I think it still is actually, but you know, fish out. But they also picked up quite a lot of fires. And obviously, being a neighbouring station, we'd take onto their ground Chelsea Wood, Paddington Wood. Chelsea Reds were a great laugh as well. They were a great bunch of lads. We had Westminster there as well. They were a great bunch of lads until that station got shut. We were just surrounded by good watches at good stations. And you're in the heart of London. Like what more do you want as a youngish firefighter? It was just buzzing. It was absolutely brilliant. And then due to an unfortunate email I sent the chief one day out of petulance, I was moved on from Knightsbridge and was sent to Battersea Red Watch. And again, landed on my feet. What an amazing watch. That station I was at for, I think, 12 years. And, you know, majority of my career. And it was just a brilliant bunch of guys. We had so much fun there. We had nights out. We had good jobs. We had hard jobs. And life was pretty amazing by this point. You know, I'd had a few different girlfriends, broken up a few times. At this point, I was now with with my now ex, but the mum of my son, Joe. We were together. That was, you know, a bit up and down, but it was good. And life was peaceful. And then we arrive at June 2017.
Yeah. It is good if you get excuse me, if you land on the right watch. You know, and I understand where you're coming from. Again, you had a lot of older school firefighters that probably their views, you know, were beyond the banter. There is banter, like we are quite open about it. Military banter, firefighter banter is brutal. It's true. It's a true story, and we do aim it at everyone. Everyone gets it. So I say it's impossible for us to be racist or sexist because everyone gets a shared amount. It's a joke. If anyone feels uncomfortable with it, then it's literally like, right, it stops. But then it goes beyond that, like you said, where some people have fundamentally in them racism, sexism ingrained into their kind of sort of persona, which, you know, is not nice. That's not my views. You know, I joke about anything and everything, as I believe it should be. It's just that humor. But yeah, well, I'm glad you find, you know, you watched I've been on the same watch for 12 years since I joined to kind of leave in recently. So I know what you mean. I when you find that watch where you all click, you know, you socialize, it's just a blessing. And I was lucky enough to find that early on, you know. So yeah, now June 2017, we know what we're going to discuss. You know, we know the events that unfolded in London, the tragic events that, you know, unfolded in London at that time, which is, of course, the Grenfell Tower fire. It got a lot of criticism from all angles, which we'll come on to. But yeah, describe to me again. I know it's a difficult topic, Ricky. I know you've kind of spoke openly, but just run me through the events of being tipped out to that fire and approaching it from because when we know as firefighters, when we rock up, we look for that orange glow, we look for them flames, and then it's all systems go. But you're going to be able to see that from a long way away. So what was the adrenaline build-up like, and what was the expectations approaching, seeing that on the horizon?
Well, as you know, sometimes on the way to fire, you won't necessarily know that it is even a fire at that. You know, you'll get called to smoke issue in. You'll turn up there, you know, burn some toast and the windows open, or the ovens, you know, just pouring out with smoke because they haven't cleaned it recently. You know, it doesn't always mean a fire. So you're right. You will have your head out the window. I'll have my nose in the air. Like, can I smell that? Can I smell that acrid smoke in through the air? Or we actually got something here. Didn't need to do that for Grenfell because the tip sheet already says, you know, you're going on the make pumps 12. So, right, it's obviously a job. You know, that you don't make it up to a 12-pump fire if there's no fire. So we knew it was a job already, and we knew it was a high rise. So on the way there, I'm thinking about high rise procedures. Where's the high rise kit? What do we need to take? And then I'm thinking, well, hang on, we're not going to need that. We've already got bridgeheads set up. They already have this equipment. We're going to need to be getting off, looked, going on, finding whoever's in charge, and then going, where do you want us? Do you want us outside? Do you want us inside? Do you want us in sets? What's going on? You know, do we need to be helping keep people warm that have evacuated? You know, all this sort of stuff is what we're thinking of. As we turned right out the station and then right again onto the main road, we had two radio messages come across. The first one was, this is now a 20-pump fire. And I thought, holy shit. We've only just, you know, the 6 to make it a 12 are still en route. And they've now made it a 20. This fire is growing rapidly. It has to be. And then the second radio message, I'll explain this briefly, just for listeners that don't know this terminology. FSG, Fire Survival Guidance. If you are a fire survival guidance call, what it means is that you are trapped by the conditions of the fire, and a member of the control team that you phone, you know, when you phone up the fire brigade, they'll answer the phone. That person that's answered the phone will stay on the phone with you until you are rescued or until you are dead. Night of Grenfell, I believe there were 11 control staff on duty. The next message I received was, there were 156 fire survival guidance calls in progress.
Wow.
And I thought, how the fuck can you even do it? And that was the first point I realised people are going to die in this fire. There's absolutely no way people aren't going to die in this fire. 156 FSGs are in progress. That doesn't mean 156 flats. That means 156 calls. So I don't know how many flats there are at Grenfell, but I don't think there might be 20 or something like that. So to have had that many FSGs, well, it means people are separated within their own flat by the conditions of the fire, phoning up potentially individually one, what it meant is that, as I said, we knew people. It meant I'm now apprehensive on the way there. I'm thinking, it's a strange night. And I remember as the fire engine got closer, we were still there fairly early on. But as the fire engine got closer, I could see flames up the outside of the building from about the 4th floor, the 24th floor, down to about 15, 14, 13 floor, in a triangular burn pan. So like up diagonally to the roof and back down diagonally the other way. And I thought, that's not right. That can't be a building fire. We've trained extensively on how fire spread externally on, and it jumps from window to window because of wind. It can't throw up the outside of the building. And yet, there we are, staring at exactly that. I remember jumping off the fire engine, grabbing the there. No, sorry, I jumped off the fire engine and I ran towards a guy called Fergie, Chelsea Red. And he was with the TL. And he's turns over a ladder for the fire brigade. So, sort of a bucket on the end and a big tool on that. Yeah. So, jumped off the fire engine, ran to the front. The TL was there, and my mate Fergie was sort of unplugging hose from the back of the TL, and all the debris from the side of the building, the panels at the side of the building were falling down on fire and landing and hitting the fire engine. So he's like, we've got to get this truck moved, So I was like, yeah. So I helped him unplug the hose, drag some hose out of the way. He's reversed the truck back away from the building. And I remember at that point standing at the base of the building and sort of looking up and thinking, holy shit, it's bad. There are people already hanging out of windows shouting for help. And I'm like, we need to get in there. So I've helped the truck get moved, reconnected hose, and then someone shouted, we need BA wearers. So I've run back to my truck, grabbed my BA set, and with my mate Leon, we've then gone into the base, the ground floor building. It's like a big lobby area that covers, I think, 2 floors. A big open area. It was already filled with quite thick, but white, that white wispy smoke. Bit acrid, but you can breathe in it and you can keep your eyes open in it, even though it stings. And we were in a queue, literally a queue of people going up the stairs to try and get to where the entry control point was. Queue of BA wearers. And then suddenly these 3 guys, sort of burst through one of the doors and shouting, casualties, still under air. And they were carrying 2 dead girls. Between 10 and 13, I would say they were. Black soot out the corners of their nose, black soot out the corners of their mouths, and lifeless. And the first guy was carrying one girl, second guy was carrying another girl, and the other guy, the third guy, some reason, made eye contact with me, looked me dead in the eyes, and he said, be careful. And that was when I realised that I was going to be seeing stuff and doing stuff that I'd never done before, seen before. And it made me feel, it was good. It made me feel nervous, but it dialed me in, really dialed me in. Those 2 girls survived, by the way. They were resussed outside, thankfully. So we've now, as part of our, in our queue, me and Leon have made our way up. We got to the bridgehead and we've been given the brief. And then we were given a different brief. And then we were given a different brief. And I realized that our brief is changing because they're deciding at different points that that person can't be saved now. So no point going there. That saved, no point going there. And so the brief that was settled on for us was go to the 15th floor, but then for rolled hose. We don't know if you'll have water when you get there. Take an enforcer with you. Obviously the 2 sets we're wearing, branch and a tip. And I thought, we're on the 4th floor. No, we're on the 3rd floor. And I'm thinking, 15th floor in standard duration BA. Don't think we can do that. I don't think we'll have enough air for that. But, you in that scenario, you get told, you get given a task. Everyone was asked, are you happy to go? To my knowledge, no one said no. I bet everyone felt no. I bet in that moment, everyone thought, no, not really. Do I want to go through, 11, 12 floors engulfed in flames with no way of protecting myself, not knowing if I'll have water when I get there and probably without an affair to get back out? No, thanks. I'll do the 5th floor. But you don't do it. You go, yep, let's go. Let's crack on. And so we picked up a length of rolled hose. We picked up the enforcer. It meant we were carrying, if you include the weight of your fire gear, your BA set, a hose, the enforcer, all this kit. Between the 2 of us, we're probably carrying about an extra 50 kg of weight each on top of our body weight. So it's a substantial increase in work rate. And then you're going up, flight after flight after flight of stairs. Very quickly, when we got into the stairwell, it was evident that all of the vents had failed. So the smoke vents in the stairwell. So the stairwell was no longer protected. It was filled with smoke. So I know we didn't do this, but I know some firefighters were removing their demand valves, sucking in lungfuls of city air, just to try and get an extra flight of stairs closer, putting the demand valve back in again, getting their lungs out, good air, just to try and make it last a little bit longer. I wish I'd had the foresight to do that, to be honest, because we may have achieved more. But it was carnage on the stairs. There was hose absolutely everywhere. There was water pouring down the stairwell from where the floors are being flooded. Can't put this fire out. There were people shouting for help to be rescued. There were firefighters shouting instructions to each other. I've got the radio in my ear going off, which is a nightmare. And it was carnage. We're pushing past people, and you have to stop and deal with things and talk and all of this stuff. And then we reached a point where suddenly it was a little bit more quiet. And we thought, we don't know what floor we're on. So I remember sort of wiping my sleeve across the wall, looking for a floor number. Well, the walls are white, soot's black, the floor numbers are painted in black. I'm not suggesting that anyone should do it in a different colour. I'm just saying it makes it a nightmare to find a floor number. It makes it even harder when, retrospectively, the refurbishment teams had fitted the lighting for the stairwells over the floor numbers. So now when you find a number, you find the edge of a number and you're like, don't know what fucking number that is. So we didn't know where we were in the building. So we've had to come off of the stairwell, which was relatively protected, onto a fire floor, still with all its equipment in tow, still with no way of protecting ourselves to do gas cooling or anything like that, with fire above us and below us at this point, and around us on this floor. We're searching in the dark, braille fashion with the back of our leather gloved hands for a door number to try and work out what floor we're in. The first time we did this, we got lost in the lobby area of the floor because we couldn't find the door back to the stairwell. Never been to the tower before, unfamiliar layout. Leon found it, thankfully. Then the hose got tangled, the middle of the hose spilled out and got tangled and knotted on the floor. At which point I'd had a meltdown and started screaming at Leon and calling him a useless prick and really had to go at him. It's a brilliant bit of leadership from Leon. bearing in mind he was a more junior firefighter than I was, but he was super calm. And he just looked at me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Rick, we've got this." And I was literally snagging him up. I was going at him because I was being a bit shit. I was struggling with the heat at this point, the exertion levels. I was getting a bit panicked. I needed a reset. What I needed was a slap across the face at that point, I think, but you can't do that in a BA face mask. So what he did was just absolutely perfect. If he had come back at me with verbals, we might well have been rolling around on the floor in the stairwell with the tower instead of trying to rescue someone. But it was a brilliant bit of leadership. So I took a breath, picked up a bundle of the hose. He picked up a bundle of the hose. Went a few more floors up. Again, had to come off the stairwell to find what floor we were on. Back onto the stairwell again. Finally arrived at the 15th floor. And our job was rescue this guy from the 15th floor on an FSG call. So we know we're his only hope. First thing I remember getting to the 15th floor was the silence. The radio had given up by this point. There was no screaming from anybody. There were no more firefighters shouting and following instructions. And I realized in that moment that me and Leon were probably the two highest up in that building at the time. And suddenly I remember feeling really lonely. It's a weird feeling. I remember feeling like, shit, we are on our own. We are not surrounded by things of people that are coming for us if this goes wrong. We are. And then I remember feeling this burning in my wrists and then again in my neck. And I thought, God, and I got the tick and I did a temperature check. It's 550 degrees at floor level, 550 degrees Celsius at floor level with no direct flame. It is hot here. It is really hot. I'm starting to realize that, we don't have long here. I'm thinking we need to gas call. We need to take the temperature down in this lobby area because I cannot think. Like knelt down on the floor with my wrist burning. So I've said to Leon, go down the end of the corridor, try and find the dry riser, see if we've even got water. Because if we had. So he'd gone off and I've now got the end of the hose and I'm passing it through the loops of other bits of hose that are tangled to try and untangle it. Luckily for me, I'm quite good with the rope stuff and I was on a rope rescue team at this point. So I'm pretty good at blindly undoing knots and stuff like that. So it didn't take me long. But I am doing this with this burning feeling stuff. And Leon's down the upper end of the corridor finding a dry riser. I'm untangling the hose. And then I hear my whistle go off, telling me I'm running out of air. And I remember thinking, fucked. I'm on the 15th floor. We've got no water still. We've still got to try and rescue this guy. And I've got 12 minutes of air left. I have to sit still. And then I remember feeling hopeless. I remember it felt like that was the moment when I realized, I'm not going to come out. That's what it felt like in the moment. I know it sounds dramatic, especially as I'm sitting here talking to you and people a bit all right, but that's how it felt in the moment. And then your training kicks in and I'm like, right, it's okay. I'll use my auxiliary hose. I'll supplement air from Leon's set. We'll be able to get out. It'll be okay. And shit, I'm down the corridor. I hear Leon's whistle go. And I was like, back to being tired. We're not going to get out of this. Leon's come back. The hose is plugged in. I felt the hose fill up with water. So relieved. Put a couple of boxes up into the air, let the steam fill up. Brought the temperature down to about 350 degrees Celsius. It was enough for the burning in your wrist. It's still really hot, obviously, but you're there now going, right, I can think. So Leon came back and I remember we sort of looked at each other through the sort of smoke. And we both knew what decision we had to make. I said to him, we can't rescue this guy. And he said, okay. And it was a heartbreaking decision to make, to get so far, to be outside this guy's front door and to realize that you're going to have to literally leave. It was brutal, brutal moment. And we had to, you know, bearing in mind, we've just got this continuing whistle going on, reminding us we're running out of air, reminding us that every second we spend there is a second less we have got before that mark to our face and we suffocate inside it or rip it off, die within 2 long puffs of toxic, very, very hot fire gases that burn your lungs on the way down. So we ditched our equipment and we ran. You know, I always say to people, I would love for this to end in some sort of heroism. I would love that more than anybody else. Because there's, you know, for a long time there was shame attached to my decision and guilt, certainly a lot of guilt at that decision. And when you've got a hand on the wall and a hand on a stairwell banister and you are throwing yourself down flights of stairs, literally running for your life, you don't feel manly, you don't feel brave, and you don't feel special, and you just feel shit. And I remember we made it out to the base of the tower, out into clean air. And I remember I'd taken my helmet off. And as I reached around with my hand to my cylinder valve, as I touched my cylinder valve, my whistle started to go. And the air gone. And I just pulled my mask off. I didn't even need to close my mouth. Then I thought, if we had spent 10 more seconds, I would have needed rescuing. If we'd spent 10 more seconds deciding whether to try and get that guy out, I may not be here. And I was absolutely, I can't describe how tired I was at this. I had given absolutely everything just to get there. And having spoken to firefighters since that night, I've been able to reframe the achievements of that first wear. I think if you ask me now, could I go in BA with all that equipment in that heat, the 15th floor and back, without running out of air? I'd say no. Yeah, do it. So, you know, it was a good achievement. It really was. In standard duration breathing apparatus, 15th floor, good going. Good going. It's just a shame that we couldn't bring someone with us. And I remember kneeling down on the grass opposite the tower. My hands in a, you know, doing some radial calling. And my head's steaming, you know, I'm bold. And I looked up at the tower and I saw a guy at about the 11th floor, somewhere like that. Mobile phone torch, I'm waving it from side to side, shouting for help. And then I remember a glow of orange behind him suddenly as the door to his room failed. And then silhouetted orange, yellow, you know. And then all of this thick black smoke poured out through the window and he sort of disappeared back into this smoke. And I realized that on my knees with my hands in this bucket of water, I just watched someone die, a human being die. And it was in that moment I said, right, get now. And I got up, said, Leon, we need to change our cylinder. It was like, yeah, no hesitation. Yeah. Changed our cylinders and went and got back in the queue to go in. By this point now, all of the other fire engines have arrived. There's a lot of people there now. And the queue was huge. Me and Leon got separated. I think he went off somewhere else. Or got tasked with something else. I was tasked with something else for a while. I was helping ferry firefighters in and out of the building with the riot shields the police had bought, and was doing something with some paperwork, FSG paperwork at one point. I was helping with that stuff. And then I found myself on my own, back in the queue with my BA set. And the second time I went into the building, I got paired up with a firefighter. I still don't know who he was. He was sadly hard to describe because we're all white bald men predominantly in London Fire Brigade. He was a nice guy. Went in with him. We were in the stairwells, probably around, I think, about the 10th floor or so. And we were just helping pass people along, pass people out. I didn't directly rescue anyone. That way didn't last long. And then the final wear was back in EDBA. Once the sun had come up, so 10 a.m. or 9:30 or something like that in the morning. And we went up to the 11th, 12th and 13th floors. And it was just ashes everywhere. Just piles of burning ash. There was nothing left in any flat. And then we left. We left there, I think, at about 2 p.m. Went for an emergency debrief, stroke, counselling intervention thing at Paddington Fire Station. Went off duty finally went off duty at 4 p.m. and was back on duty at 8 p.m. that same day. And the second night, last night shift, was just a normal shift, and it was there was a real weird sense of, was that real? Has that just happened? We're back in tonight now, and we're just sort of doing everything as we would have done had last night not happened. And it was weird, and I was really relieved to go off duty at the end of that second night shift, and then had a day off, and then my pager went off, and I was being recalled with USAR teams to go back to Grenfell to help the DVI police teams with body recovery. And so I went back for body recovery, and that was horrific. I won't go into details about things because I want to remain respectful for the people that lost so many people. But you could see how people had died. You could see a story with every single person, and it was just utterly heartbreaking. And I think that, combined with the failed rescue on the first attempt in the building, the actual night, sent me off on a poor mental health. Being diagnosed with PTSD, drinking heavily, taking drugs. Life just got really shit really quick.
Yeah, I can't imagine what you went through. I'm a firefighter. I've been in house fires, I've been in building fires, but I don't think that's a once in a career event that you can't really prepare for. And I think people they see Hollywood films and see that firefighters walking around in Hollywood films and with the masks off and just putting it on when they go in a room. Reality is not like that. It's confusing, it's disorientating, it's horrendous conditions, and to be faced with mass amounts of casualties, and so many limitations as well. The limitations to overcome you had it up against you from the off. So to see those things and kind of to be sat here talking about them, Ricky, is kind of detriment to your character, because I think anyone that have been in that situation are going to suffer with mental health issues after that. Everyone involved, from obviously the families that were involved of sadly the people that lost their life, to all the emergency services workers, it's going to come away affecting you for life, sadly, with some form of kind of mental health issue. Would you say that's a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I think so. The way I describe a human being now is we're like a jug, and trauma is water being poured into that jug. And in order for your jug not to overspill, you have to tip your jug every now and then and pour a bit of that water out, get rid of a bit of that trauma. And like you said earlier, the way we do that in the fire service is dark humour, banter around station, ripping the piss out of each other. It might also be those times when you go to the pub and there's just a couple of you and you actually have a bit of a deep and meaningful, and you talk about things a bit more openly, and you have a little moment, and then you laugh about it, or say, "Oh, don't tell anyone I've got emotions." And but we let bits out. We tip that jug a little bit. what I say is that if you don't tip that jug and you can't turn that tap off, you're going to overflow. And that's what happened with me in Grenfell. I felt like my jug was smashed in half, stuck under the tap, and the tap was turned on full. I'm trying to piece together this broken jug so I can hold more water whilst that tap is still pouring into it. And it was just hopeless. It was a hopeless task. And I failed miserably at it. You know, very, very quickly, I was crying all the time, like constantly crying. And it was embarrassing. There was no warning with it. I would be stood there next to the sandwiches in Tesco, and I'd just get this feeling, and I'd go, shit, I'm going to cry. And I'd have to drop stuff and walk out the shop. I did try and find somewhere quiet to cry. And then I'd come back in afterwards, and I'd be like, you know, that was weird. You know, pick me shopping up and get on with my day. It's embarrassing when that happens, because people are going, guy's a lunatic. And I was crying all the time at home. I remember one day I was at home, and one of my friends, Dawn, was popping around to say hi. And there was an outpouring of sympathy and empathy for the firefighters as much as there was for the community, because they realised that firefighters would have been struggling with their attendance for this fire. And it was no different with my friends. You know, I got a few cards from friends and, you know, you're our hero and all that sort of stuff. And Dawn came round this one day, and I remember partner Jo at the time, she said, oh, Dawn's going to be here in a minute. And I just had a meltdown. I had a complete panic. And I still don't know why. And she's lovely. I had a complete panic. And I ran upstairs, and I sat on my bed. And I remember just sat staring at the wardrobe mirror, going, what do I do? What do I do? And then I remember even in that moment, I was thinking, what do I do about what? Nothing's happening. And then I could hear her at the door, like, hello, babes, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. To Jo. And I'm thinking, I'm on the bed and I'm going, please don't come up. Please don't come up. Please don't come up. And I hear her coming up. And I'm like, I don't want you to come in. I don't want you to come in. And she just sort of knocked on the door and sort of went, you're right, Rick. Looked at me, and I just went. I just broke down, burst into tears. And this poor woman's had to come and sit next to me on a bed, horrendously uncomfortable. And then just sort of like, it'll be okay, Rick. And me on the back. And I'm just there, sobbing like my mum's just died. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was sorrowful, pain-filled, guttural crying. It was awful. And those moments just didn't stop for such a long time. Such a long time now. I'd started using coke, and then very quickly a circle of friends changes, and I was drinking all the time. I became verbally abusive around my son. You know, I lost all interest in him. I lost all interest in Jo. He would say to me sometimes, like, oh, can you empty the dishwasher? And I remember this is actually an actual incident. Can you empty the dishwasher? I opened the dishwasher, pulled the top tray out, and the fork got caught because she hadn't put it in the rack. And I nearly smashed the house up. I was effing and blinding and screaming at her, and, you know, you stuck it, probably, what's wrong with you? And I was so angry, like I was livid with her. And the scary thing is, bearing in mind, I'd never suffered from mental health before, so I had no idea that this was PTSD, you know, the start of PTSD. But in my head, in that moment, I was absolutely 100% certain she deserved it. I was 100% certain that my reaction was proportionate to what had just happened. Which is scary, because it can't be, can it? There's no way any sane person would look at that and go, yeah, fair enough. Well, put the fork in properly. You know, it's ridiculous. And my son was witness to moments like this. And I had some awful moments with my son. You know, I think when he was 6, bearing in mind he just turned 4 when Grenfell happened. So this is like a couple of years after the fire now. I'm still in a mess. And I remember one day he wouldn't eat his dinner and I dragged him from the table, pulled his trousers and pants down and smacked him across his arse really hard. And he stared at me defiantly. And I said, did that hurt? And I could tell it did. Of course it did. And I smacked him again. Did that hurt? No. Smacked him again. He started to tear up. Did that hurt? No. Smacked him again and he burst into tears and then wet himself. Stood there in front of me and wet himself with fear. I did that to my son.
But like you said, there, it's not a reflection of your character. It's what you were dealing with at that time. So I'm not saying it's justifiable. And what I'm saying is like you're not in control through external sources that have caused that. And again, I know it's difficult. I can see it etched on your face and your emotions there about talking about it. But you know, it's a difficult topic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And you know what? It was a real hard time. And what I find so upsetting about it is he's such a good kid and he's got so much love in him. You know, and every kid deserves to have a parent that makes them feel safe, you know? And I'd removed that from him. I'd removed that place of safety from him. And I'd become my stepdad. And for a very long time, I hated myself for that. And I still do. You know, I still hate that moment happened. But like you said, no one would choose that. No one would have chosen the pain that I felt in, you know, consistently for years. And that's what it was. It was consistent pain for years. I had a moment, not long before his mum left me. She left me, fire happened in June. And I think September was a birthday. I think November we separated. We haven't quit, you know, months after the fire. And just before we separated, I had a moment where I got off the couch to go and get a glass of water. Sort of sat down on the floor, cross-legged in primary school. And I started to cry. And I realized this time it was weird. This particular time, I realized I wasn't going to stop. It was different. And in that moment, I realized that this was how I was going to feel for the rest of my life. And then logic kicks in and you go, well, if that's how you're going to feel for the rest of your life, why would you want to live the rest of your life? And then, you know, sat on the floor, dreary November weather, crying my eyes out. I just thought, oh, I'm doing. And I always thought that people that think about taking their own lives were weak. I always thought people that think about taking their own lives were doing it because they don't feel that anyone's up to them or they don't feel like they're good enough. And I realize now that none of that is true. The reason I thought about taking my own life is because I was in too much pain to go on. I knew people loved me. I knew my son loved me. I knew that everyone wanted me to get better. I knew that lots of people would be willing to help. But it was a moment of, ultimately, it was a moment of, I guess you could call it cowardice in a sense that it's a giving up moment. But more than that, it was a moment of realization that this is just going to hurt too much. So I'm better off. It will hurt me less to take my own life than it will to live. That was, I guess, ultimately where I was at. And I'm very, very lucky that I made 2 phone calls from that floor, one to my mum and one to my dad. excuse me, one to my mum, one to my dad, and both people picked up. And both of them said, go to the doctors, you need to get some help. I'd already started counselling by this point. But they said, go to the doctors. And I phoned the GP up, and the GP said to me, we've just had a cancellation. If you can get her in 15 minutes, you can have the appointment. And I lived a 10-minute walk away. Talk about stars aligning. And I got up and I got dressed, and I hot-footed it down to the GP, walked in, tried to speak, burst into tears again. And she sort of like threw some antidepressants at me and said, you've got PTSD. Now, I have always been anti-antidepressants. I hate the idea of them. I look at it and I go, well, what happens when you stop taking them? All your problems are waiting for you. All they do is it's like putting a coat of paint over a rusty car. Like, you've still got a fucking rusty car. What I didn't realise or anticipate is how much help they can give you whilst you're doing other work. So I was going to counselling, and what I needed was to be removed from a dangerous mental place so that I could continue to do the good work in counselling. And taking those antidepressants probably saved my life. My mum and my dad answering the phone that day really saved my life. Having a son probably saved my life because, you know, in that moment, I also thought of him and how ashamed he would be if he grew up knowing that his dad gave up. And I've never wanted to be that. I've never given up in my life, apart from the 3 mile MC. Never given up in my life to this point. You know, anything I set out to do, I succeed in, I achieve it. And giving up just wasn't in my nature, really. And so to be in that moment where I'm now thinking I'm going to give up, you know, I wouldn't have wanted that to have been associated with me. A little bit personal pride. So what I say to people now regarding antidepressants and the counselling is that, again, another analogy, PTSD to me, PTSD and depression, because that's what came from it. It felt like I was trapped in a dark room, no doors, no windows, no light coming in, no way of getting out, no hope. And having the counselling was like someone cut a skylight into the ceiling and some lights coming in now. And now I can see a way out. I've got a little bit of hope, which is incredible. But I can't reach the skylight. I'm jumping and I can't get there and I can't drag myself out. Taking antidepressants was like someone lowered in a footstool. I can now reach the skylight, and it's still going to be hard work dragging my ass out, but I can do it. And it was the first moment where I had a real tangible view of a solution. And, you know, the road to recovery was not easy. The road to recovery was 1 step forwards, 8 steps back sometimes, and sometimes it was 5 steps forward, 1 step back. And, you know, it was a roller coaster. I thought it would be, once you've decided I want to get help, I want to heal. Once you start to heal, that's just a continuous process going up until you arrive at a point where you're like, hey, I'm good. And it's really not. There were relapses with drugs, there were problems, there were all sorts, you know, all sorts of stuff going on where I would still fail. And I started a new relationship, and that wasn't great. And, you know, that was a bit of a trauma bond relationship. I think, again, she's inherently a good person, but she had a lot of stuff going on at home with family and life generally. She lost her dad when she was young. You know, there was lots of stuff going on with her. And it meant that our relationship was born of pain rather than born of stability.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't a great relationship, although she was extremely supportive throughout my recovery. I also wasn't honest with her about my recovery in terms of, you know, drug use and stuff like that. You know, I was still using coke quite a lot. And it was just a very up and down time. But I was very lucky that there were lots of positive things that started to happen as well. And each positive thing that started to happen put me a step closer. It gave me another thing that I could cling to that was good. Do you know what I mean? So that it was enough then for me to go, I'm going to keep working because this is good. This is something I've got that's good. So after the fire, I call this the sliding doors phase of my life, because I had this undercurrent of pain and trauma and recovery and drugs and alcohol. And then running alongside it was me writing a poem about the fire, the poem being made into a short film, that short film being nominated for an award at an international film festival in Manchester. After going to Manchester, me and the director, then BBC Breakfast finding out we were there and saying, can you come on BBC Breakfast, talk about trauma, talk about did in the film, obviously. And then Man United contacted us and said, we hear you're both Man United fans. Would you like a stadium tour? We're going to do an interview with you for Man United TV. So the club I'd supported since I was 6 years old, I'm now sat in their famous MUTV recording room being interviewed about the Grenfell Tower fire in the film. And I will now forever be on the Man United website. And, you know, things like that taking place were just incredible. And then for the, I think it was for the 1 year anniversary or the 2 year anniversary, This Morning got in touch. So we went and did a thing with This Morning. And then lots of stuff, people started to reach out to me, firefighters, initially from the UK, then from America, and then from all over the world, police officers, and then just staff, and then some military personnel would say, hey, I've seen this interview you've done. Like, it was really powerful. Thank you. I needed to hear that. I'm starting counselling tomorrow. And I was like, holy shit, this is important. This is talking about it. It's important. It's going to help people. So I started to do it more, and I started to do podcasts. I then go on people's podcasts and interviews and stuff. And as you all know, London Fire Brigade didn't like that. They tried to stop the film being released in the first instance. So I had to go around that a very sneaky way, got away with it. They didn't like the podcast. They didn't like, they didn't like anything. They said no to everything pretty much. They were not happy with anything. And the more I asked them for me to be allowed to do stuff, the more they started saying no. And I realized that in actual fact, they were going to hold me back. And then we arrived at the point where I went into work one day and said, I've applied for SAS Who Dares Wins. I think I'm going to get on the show. I don't know yet. But if I do, can I have permission to go and do it? And I was told, absolutely. Not for me, Rick, but you're lunatic enough to go on it. By all means, go on it. Go and do it. And so I continued the application. And then when it came down to it, I had a meeting with my borough commander. And he said to me, yeah, really sorry, Rick, we're not going to be able to let you do it. I said, sorry? So you literally said to me that I could do it. Yeah, we don't think it's the right opportunity for you. The greatest respect, Doug, 41 years old. I'll decide what's the opportunity for me. Grown-up man. Well, we're concerned it might upset, the survivors from Grenfell and the bereaved families. Excuse me? In what way will that, anyway, the conversation went on. And the bottom line was they didn't give me permission to do it. And I then turned around and said, well, I'm doing it. If they say yes, I'm doing it. And he said, well, if you do that, you will be disciplined. And I said, okay. And then literally, I'm not joking, about 15 minutes after that conversation, the casting director contacted me and said, I've got some amazing news, Rick. You've been selected. You're going to be on SAS Who Dares Win. And I was like, thanks. Like, I'm very happy. And I was like, sorry, I've got stuff going on. Yeah, I'm really pleased. I'm doing it. Yeah, thanks. Put the phone down. I was like, what do I do now? Is this worth risking career for? Career that I'd worked really hard at and was very good at. And I thought back to all these messages and stuff, and I thought, it's a big platform. It's a big platform for me to go on there, tell my story. And hopefully, millions of people watch it. It's going to help people. hopefully someone will see that. I'll talk about my journey a little bit because I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to do that if I stay long enough. And it's going to help people. So I made myself a promise. I said, I'm going to go on the show and I will stay as long as I need to tell my story and as long as I want to. And I made myself a promise that I wouldn't stay if I wasn't enjoying it or if I felt like it was going to undo some of the progress that I'd made with getting through PTSD. And so the show happened. It was lockdown at this point. So we were flown up to Scotland and I was stuck in a hotel room for 10 days. It was like prison. And they stuck me in this hotel room to quarantine and they would come in and COVID test me every day. We were allowed out for an hour a day. So I'd go and run a 10K, come back. And I came off social media and I did myself an Excel spreadsheet of every minute of the day accounted for. So I had some regime so that I didn't go stir crazy. You know, just sitting in the bed on social media would have been horrific. So it was, you know, like get up at 6:30 to 7, stretching, you know, 7 to 7:30, I'm going to do these press ups out. 7:30 to 8:30, I'm going to have breakfast. 8:30, I'm going to have a shower. At 9, I'm going to build 2 hours of airfix models. You know, it was that sort of thing. And every minute was accounted for. And I think it was day 8 that I phoned my dad. And we were chatting away and he said, Rick, I'm really sorry to say this, but are you okay? And I went, yeah, I'm fine, Dad. And he went, sorry, that sounded weird. I mean, you sound amazing. Is everything okay? and I went, yeah, do you know what, Dad? I feel peaceful. I feel at peace. And I think what I needed was to be taken away from the fire brigade environment, the home environment with this former bond relationship that was very hectic. And just to be dumped in this wonderful part of Scotland, Portree, in this lovely little sort of bread and breakfast above a pub that I just sat in solitude and just did some meditative self sort of physical and mental well-being stuff. And I like I said, I felt peaceful. And then I was like, shit, this is not a good start to a show like Guess Who Dares Wins. And I remember speaking with the director, I think it was that same day, and he said, look, I've got wind, the COVID guy come around and he'd done some testing and he said, is everything all right? And I said, oh yeah, work. And I know what's going on. And I told him that I'd had some emails from work by this point saying, we believe you've gone away to film. When you get back, you're going to be sacked. So I'm now up there thinking I'm going to walk back to no job. I've lost my career. And then I was speaking with my union representative and he was saying, they can't tell you you're going to be sacked. It's illegal. They haven't even done an investigation. There's no proof of anything. Blah, 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 blah. So it put my mind at rest a bit. But I told the COVID guy, up the thing. He then told the director, so that the director's contacted me and he said, look, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. We can fly you back home. We've got reserves. We've got, 3 other people here that can step in at any moment to take your spot. And it was a tough decision because I thought I've kind of got quite a lot out of this process already. I had my 10 days or nearly, 8 days, 9 days, whatever it was. I feel at peace. Do I need to do the show? Is it worth the risk of losing a career? And I think somewhere deep inside, I knew that career was on its last legs anyway. And I also really, really, really believe, maybe arrogantly, but I really, really believe that me being on that show would help someone. Maybe just one person, but it would help someone. And I said, no, I want to do it. I'm gonna give it my, everything. And so we started filming, and I think from pretty much the first minute of filming, I thought, what have I done? I don't want to be here. Well, I don't need this. I don't need this. There were people there that had stuff to prove. There were people there that had never boxed, didn't know how to abseil, had never worn a gas mask. And there were people there that had never done all of these tasks, like crawling through tunnels in the dark to find your way to a thing, to bring the thing out, And I'm there going, spent years doing. I've spent years doing all this stuff. None of this is a carrot for me. None of this is going to make me go, right, I'll just push through all this shit bit today so I can do that cool shit tomorrow. I can do that cool shit tomorrow anyway. I don't need to be here to do that. I also don't need to be called a cunt 17 times a day. It's not, I don't need that in my life. I wanted my moment. And so I thought, I'm just going to stay for the moment. I'm going to stay for the moment. And I did. It was one episode of SAS. It was 2 days of filming. I feel like I gave a relatively good account of myself for the short time I was there. Smashed an abseil in 5 seconds, was well pleased with that. Although, if I hadn't have smashed an abseil in 5 seconds, I reckon the rope rescue team at the London Fire Brigade would have had something to say about it.
Yeah, it would have done, yeah.
But, I had my moment. I had my moment to do my mirror room interview, to talk about PTSD, to talk about Grenfell. And then I had an opportunity to leave. Everyone's getting beasted. Someone's got to go. I was cold. I was wet. I was tired. I was only 2 days in. And I was miserable. And I just thought, I can go. And the only thing that would have or could have kept me there would have been my concern that everyone else would have gone, failure. You gave up. And then I realized that if that's the reason I stay, then I'm not as far along in my recovery process as I would like to think I am. And I thought, I'm not staying here. I'm not staying here for anyone else. I'm not enjoying it. I've got out of it. I've gotten out of it already. There's no winner's medal. There's no prize fund at the end. You don't go on a big holiday. You just get a handshake. Oh, well done. You literally get out of it what you get out. And I'd got out of it what I needed. And had an opportunity to go at a point where it was going to help some others. Great. Like I said, I'd done my interview and I felt ready to go. I regretted it the next day. Not going to lie. I wrestled with that decision for a while because, there were parts of me that thought I'd started my speaking business by this point. And I thought, it would have been really good for my business if I had stayed and said, I was a SAS Who Dares Wins finalist or winner. It's great this is resilience. This is, but I thought I don't need that. I've done enough of that in my life already. So I got over it. I got over it fairly quickly.
No, that's look, you and as someone said to me, it's quite liberating when you get to the point in your life where you don't give a shit what people think of you. And I mean that in a nice way. Like if you don't like me, you don't like me. And what you've done there is you had a goal of going on that program to raise awareness, to speak about your experience, to help someone. You achieved that, so I would take that as a success. And it's not always about the business in the bigger picture. Hindsight's a beautiful thing, but that time you were trying to recover. That was the most important thing, and it always will be. Your health takes precedence over anything. Your mental health, your physical health. It's about taking them steps to kind of make yourself a better person in that regard. So those things can come after, and obviously you're very successful now with your business and your keynote speaking and stuff like that. And I've seen you on the podcast circuit because people want to listen to what you've got to say. So that it hasn't been detrimental to you. It's probably been a positive thing. But I kind of want to touch back on there. Firstly, absolutely outstanding how you've come through it and you're continuing to kind of hopefully push out of the dark and rise out the ashes without that being some sort of corny pun. But it kind of you're succeeding. You're in a good place. I'm disappointed in the fire service. We talked off air about the fire service, my current situation and what's led me to kind of leave the fire service. Different circumstances, obviously, to yours. I'm not trying to compare. You're trying to raise awareness. You're trying to talk about positive mental health and almost you are pointing out their failings because let's be honest, the fire service as a whole are failing with looking after people's mental health. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, they absolutely are. There are so many examples now. I speak to so many people that are disillusioned with the fire service. Some people are stuck in the job because
Pension
sadly
trap.
to they're close enough to retirement age and getting a full pension that they need to stay for another 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes even years. And they don't want to start a new career at this point, you know, and that's fair enough. But they are absolutely rhythmically failing their firefighters, but so are the police, some of the ambulance service. All the services are failing. They're being underfunded. We've got the wrong people in charge of a lot of these things now. I feel like the fire brigade, funnily enough, I mean, I can only speak for London, to be honest with you, but London Fire Brigade's management team, I feel, has got better, not worse. But it still feels very tick boxy when it comes to mental health. I think it's a massive, massive problem. And I think they're scared to open the lid on it. Because if they do, they turn around and say PTSD, stress, work-related stress, all of this stuff is due to service. Well, fuck me, how many people are you going to have at work tomorrow? I'm struggling. Everyone's struggling. And they don't have a department sufficient to deal with it. You know, they've got a couple of counsellors at the counselling and wellbeing team. Well, it's not good enough. You walk in there, the first thing you're told is you've got 15 sessions. Equate that to 15 hours. So I walk in there, my lifetime of trauma, Grenfell's happened, my relationship's failing, I'm snorting coke, I'm drinking heavily, and they go, 15 hours to unfuck yourself. Cheers. What happens at hour 16? Well, you're on your own, mate. Brilliant. Great. Well, let's get started then. You know, it's ridiculous. I didn't need 15 sessions. I needed 80, you know, and you just get kicked out the other end. I remember after my last counselling session, 15. At the end of it, he said to me, and by the way, the counsellor I had was amazing. He was such a lovely, lovely, lovely guy. Really got on with him, and he definitely helped. But 50 hours wasn't enough. And at the end of that session, he said, "How do you feel?" I looked at him and I went, "I feel great. I'm so thankful so much. This has been an incredible experience and very, very worthwhile." And he said, "I'm really pleased to hear that." So I walked out there and I walked past Euston Fire Station into a pub, got pissed and cried because I was back on my own.
Yeah. And
I didn't know where else to go. I didn't know what else to do. That was my avenue. That was what I had.
Yeah,
and I didn't know the other
that's
stuff.
what the fire service is kind of the fire brigade, the fire service is good for. Is like you are around like-minded individuals. The people at your level, watch level, are there as a support network. Unbeknown sometimes to them, they're a support network. So when you step away from it, you're suddenly you're isolated. You know, and I can relate this to the military. You can relate it to it. So you know, you walk away. From that job, it's not the job that you miss, it's the people that you work with and the support network you have.
Yeah.
And I just think, again, with the fire service, without slagging them off, because I've had an amazing 12 years, I'm sure you had an amazing character as well, but they are failing at management level constantly, absolutely constant. And like I say, to try and literally, in your circumstances as well, punish you for speaking out about something that needs speaking out about and trying to highlight the things that they need to do better, that should be welcomed. And positive criticism would be like, you know, you're highlighting something, we need to fix it, but it's not the fire service attitude. They will just punish you, reprimand you. It's like they're trying to institutionalize people and make them scared to leave them, see anything outside of the fire service, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. The way I describe the fire service to people now, it's not very kind, but I describe the fire service as the abusive partner in a relationship. What they do is they sell you this dream. They show you their amazing side. They go, "You're going to do all this cool stuff. Look at the facilities we've got. Yet going to fires. It looks great on a CV. Come and join us. Come and join us." And you go, "This relationship looks brilliant. This person seems stable." And then you join the job. And it's a whirlwind. You get love bombed. It's brilliant. You're tearing around the streets of London or wherever, whatever brigade, you know, in a fire engine, and you're putting out fires and you're saving people's lives, and you're like, oh my God, this relationship is amazing. And then they turn around and they go, right, we've got some more qualifications for you. You can get to do some more cool stuff. They are in-house qualifications, so they won't be of any use to you outside. But to be fair, you don't need anyone outside. You're happy with us. So we're going to train you up so that you're only valuable here. And then they train you up so that you are only valuable there, where you are. And you've got these rope skills and these water rescue skills and these USAR skills. Guess where they're valuable? With us. Where else? Go outside to do confined space work. Confined space ticket. But I do confined space with the fire brigade. But you've done that under a USAR umbrella, which is an internal qualification. We haven't given you the skills that we could have given you. So that's valuable outside. We want you to be valuable just with me. And so you stay. And then over time, you realize that you've got no value in the outside. You only hold value here. And if you were to leave them, where would you go anyway? What would you do anyway? No one out there wants you. You're here. And now that they've got you, they then beat you with a stick. They then say, you can't do this. You can't go there. I know it's USAR is voluntary, but we're going to make you do courses on your days off. And if you don't do it, we're going to discipline you. But you can't do that. It's a voluntary course while you're doing it. What else are you going to do? Or you can be sacked. Where are you going to go? Who are you going to see? What qualifications have you got? Well, then you best toe the line. And that's exactly how the fire brigade works. And it's only when you finally break free and have the courage to leave that you go, oh my God, I have so much value in the outside world.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have put it better myself. And they make it difficult. You get to your mid-40s. I'm mid-40s now, and I've literally just left, and I am literally like, oh. And then job opportunities, they make it like your salary's awesome and everything else. And you believe it. And you think, oh, I can't possibly do any better out of the fire service. You step away and all of a sudden people recognize that you've got other qualities, other skills, and it's not difficult, you know. But yeah, it's a sad state. I hope they change, because I'll say it, you'll probably agree with me. It always has the potential to be the best job on the planet. And everyone says that. But the management, it's not the firefighters at firefighter level, you know, it is management level and above. And we see it all the time. It's toxic. You know, it's the cultural, they always kind of blame us for cultural problems. The cultural problem lies in the management. It literally, you know.
I mean, look at West Mids recently. Look at West Mids with Wayne Brown recently. You know, it was a deceitful liar. There is, I mean, I don't know what I'm allowed to say, but there is a lot of stuff that went on with Wayne Brown, and I knew him. I always found him to be a relatively nice guy. I think it's a real shame that he took his own life off the back of all of this stuff coming out. But he wasn't a good human being. He just wasn't, and he is at chief officer level, and he lied about having a degree, and there's loads of stuff. But when you've got someone in charge like that, what chance is there for the rest of the organization to be what it should be? Do you know what I mean? When you've got corruption at that level, and that's actual corruption, but then beneath that, you've just got egotistical lunatics who are they're so busy being in charge, they forget to be a leader. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. There are very, very few leaders in the fire service. They're not all bad at management level. I have met some absolutely cracking managers in my 12 years in the fire service, but unfortunately, they are a dying breed. And what you've got now is exactly that, egotistical, for that word, yeah, if I could pronounce it properly.
Yeah.
Sort of, I've got no, you know, I've got a manager that I've just left, you know, working with, who's been in the fire service since he was in his early 20s. He's done nothing else outside of the fire service. And he just believes it's the be all and end all and demands respect cutting around. Doesn't work like that. It's got no idea how to manage people, no idea how to lead. Wouldn't know leadership if it jumped up and bitten on his arse. And this is constant. And look, for me, it is dead easy to understand. I can see their feelings. So can majority of the people. You can see it, but they will never change. They will never fix it. And it's sad. It is sad. But look, I'm glad we've woke up to the way it is, and we've kind of I've suffered a lot of stress over the last few weeks making this decision. As soon as my resignation went in, it's like a stress lifted from me. I stopped having anxiety attacks. Honestly, Ricky, I'm not kidding. And I know you probably felt the same, and you've stepped away from that environment, that toxic environment. And it's a
Yeah.
healing process. You leave, you know?
And do you know what? Life now, have we got time still?
Yeah.
Yeah. Life now has been, it's just brilliant. You know, I've got a new partner. I say new, we've been together 3 years. We got engaged a month ago.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much. She is, like, I don't want to be too gushy on a podcast, but she is just a godsend. She challenges me to reach a higher bar, but she does it kindly and with a bit of gentleness. She's measured, she's intelligent, she's successful in her own right. I don't know why she's with me. she's beautiful. You know, she's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful human being. And how I describe her to people now is we had a chat one day, about a year and a half into our relationship, I guess. And I remember what we were talking about. I think I was talking about trauma dumping on her again. And she said, she'd said something to me which made me realize that she was afraid that I might relapse. She was afraid that I might go for a period of time when I will really, really struggle with my mental health again. And I got really upset. And she was like, why are you upset? I said, because I've just realized that I'm always going to be seen as like a delicate object, handled with care, broken vase, you know, cracks all in it. Because you're talking about a concern regarding something that happened before you even knew I existed. All of that stuff happened before you. And yet it's still potentially, well, it is actually still affecting you because you're worrying, you've got concerns that I might break again. And that makes me feel really weak. It makes me feel a bit shit. And she said to me, she said, do you know what I see, Rick? To use your broken vase analogy, I see that, yeah, fair enough, you're a broken vase, but I see that you've put yourself back together. And so whilst I don't want you to break again, I also know, because I can feel those cracks in your vase, I can see you already know how to put yourself back together. So I know you've got the strength to do that, and I've got the confidence in you that you'll be able to, should the worst case scenario happen. All I need to do, hand you the glue.
No, what a wonderful way of putting it.
Yeah. And I thought, what an incredibly wonderful woman.
You've caught your
get married.
unicorn.
Yeah, there you go. She is definitely a unicorn. And so, you know,
No.
I've got the relationship. That's good. Life's good. My business, justrick.co.uk. If anyone wants to book me for a keynote.
Link will be in the bio for this podcasting and all the clips I put out, Rick.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. Yeah, you know, business is good. I've become involved in lots of things. The Gratitude Games. We're launching on the 5th of November 5th of November in Manchester. The Gratitude Games, how do I explain this? It is a 1-week sporting event for all emergency service workers and their families to come along and take part. They will be required to raise a minimum of, I think it's 250 or 300 pounds in sponsorship. That money comes to the games. It gets handed to our sister charity. Got to get that right. Our sister charity, Emergency Services Giving. And what we do with that charity then is we distribute that money through some existing charities like Police Care UK, the Firefighters Charity, an NHS one, I can't remember what it's called. And what we have then is we have a level of governance over how that money is spent. And the idea of this is that we now will be contributing towards a tailored, bespoke, immediate mental health service for emergency service workers across the UK. So it means when you are struggling, you will come to us and you will say, I need some help. And we will go, call, speak to your firefighter, speak to the firefighters charity. they will be reportable to us with the money we give them. So quarterly or whatever, they'll have to come to us and go, right, we've had 150 requests for counselling. 130 of them were dealt with within the first week. 20 of them were dealt with within the second week. We will say, we need all 150 in the first week, next quarter, please. So do you need more money for that? Was it a funding issue? Work that out. The idea is that through these existing charities, there will be an immediate care package for people so that you aren't there in places that I've been and, you know, potentially you've been, some of our listeners have been, where you are 15 hours and 1 minute into your 15 hours of counselling and thinking about crying in a pub. Instead of that, you're just going to have continued support and continued help where the government can't provide it, where the government choose not to provide it, where the fire and rescue services can't provide it because of funding. It will be an annual event. So the first one, we're proving the concept. June next year is when the games will actually take place in Manchester. It'll be heavily advertised a week before, 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after. We're doing a feature-length documentary to go alongside it, which I think I will potentially be hosting and certainly featuring in, where hopefully we'll be able to interview some emergency service workers about incidents that have caused them to struggle with their mental health and film them through into participation in the games and a little bit of out the other side, what's next for you sort of thing. So we've got that coming out. I became an ambassador for Unlocking Potential. It's an amazing children's charity. If anyone wants to donate to a children's charity, Unlocking Potential is undoubtedly the one. They came into my son's primary school and gave him counselling when he needed it, when he was struggling with his behaviour as a result of all of my shit. They then offered me a parenting course, which I did not do because I said, absolutely no way. I not accepting that I'm a bad dad. Can't do that. So I don't. I then went back a week later and said, I'm an idiot. I want the course. Please give me the course. So I did the course, and 12 weeks, most amazing thing I ever did, changed everything for me and my son, brought us closer together, allowed me the space to revisit periods in our relationship where I really got things wrong, the smacking incident, other times as well, and apologized to him. I'm really sorry. That was not your fault. That was my fault. I was failing. I was failing you and I was failing myself. I was failing to be a good dad. Not your fault. That's my fault. And I'm really sorry. Gave him the space to say, it's okay, Dad. I know you were struggling. I love you. We're good. And we're super close now. We're working on a little project at the moment with Unlocking Potential to do a spoken word, put together a spoken word piece over a Coldplay track. We've had Coldplay's permission to do it, which is incredible. Conversation, spoken word between me and my son, where we're describing our perspectives of different incidents, different moments, and then thanking Unlocking Potential at the end for bringing us back together, and they can use that in their fundraising campaigns and stuff. So that's a really exciting project. As I said, with Just Rick, with the speaking business, I'm building slowly. I'm enjoying building slowly. I'm starting to talk now. I go into prisons and talk to prisoners. I go into prisons and talk to staff. I go to schools and talk to children or young adults. So I go into building and lighting companies to talk to them about the real life impact, building failures from corner cutting, and specifically around what happens when the people don't die. You know, if someone dies, you know exactly where you are. Someone's died, people are going to jail. But what happens when the people don't die? I need you to understand the long-term struggles and the amount of people it affects when you've put in a bit of a Friday shift because you want to go home, and what that could mean for someone like me who's turning up to put the fire out in a building that fails around him.
Yeah.
All this sort of stuff, you know, lots of exciting projects going on. I'm doing a talk for the police. I've done a few for the police now, but I'm doing another one next month for the Police Negotiators Conference in London, where I'm going to be talking to them about how you recover when you succeed, you know, negotiators. Presumably, if they are negotiating their little answers off, it doesn't have a favourable outcome. That's got to be a bitter pill to swallow. And I think there are some similarities to be found there between that and me sat outside on that one, knelt outside the front door of a person whose only chance of survival is me, and I make the decision to turn away and get out of the building. So there's lots of crossovers with my company and lots of ways I can draw in, on the stuff I'm doing. So it's exciting times, I'm in a good headspace. Yeah, life's good.
No, look, I will support you in any way I can with what you're trying to push. And I will put links in all the podcasts and all the clips, like I said, to your site, to the games that you've got coming up. If I can be involved in any way that will help promote it, I will do. I'm all about helping others as, in the same way. So look, Rick, I could chat to you about this stuff all day. I'm sure you've got stuff to do, but look, thank you very much. It's not an easy topic to talk about. Obviously, you've had your struggles over the years. You've been faced with extreme animosity, over the years, and if that's the right word, or extreme conditions and stuff like that. And it seems like you're on the up. And I hope the journey continues. And, I hope people take something away from this. I know I always say if I can take something away from a podcast, on this occasion, I've taken a lot away. So thank you very much for taking the time to come in on. You look like you've got one more thing you want to tell me.
Sorry, I have. I'm so sorry. I have. I know you were winding it down then, but I always try and finish off with this just because it's such a beautiful real life experiment, and it carries so much weight for people. So there was an experiment conducted in the 1950s by a Harvard graduate professor called Dr. Richter. And he conducted an experiment where he put a rat in a bucket of water and he timed to see how long the rat would swim for before it gave up and drowned. The rat swam for around 15 minutes. He plucked the rat out of the bucket of water, dried it, stuck it in a cage, let it recover. Sometime later, I don't know how long it was, but sometime later he took the same rat, put it back in the same bucket of water and timed it to see how long it would swim for the second time. No one ever guesses. I'm not going to ask you to guess because it's utterly pointless. The second time, the rat swam for 60 hours. From 15 minutes to 60 hours. And he was absolutely baffled by this. And the scientific conclusion, the only possible conclusion he come to, was that because the rat was saved last time, believed all it has to do is keep swimming, be saved again. And that gave that rat enough strength to increase its swim time from 15 minutes to 60 hours. And what I say to people is that you have to be brave enough to be the hand or brave enough to be the rat at different times in your life. But you also have to be smart enough to be the hand or the rat at some points in your life. You have to know which one you are. You have to be brave enough to make the right choice. We all have the power to save somebody by sticking our hand in that bucket of water and plucking out the rat. But we also need to be wise enough, smart enough to know if we're the rat and to look out just to keep swimming and live.
Excellent, Rick. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I've never heard that before, and I will look that up and have a read. Ricky, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing. You take care, stay in touch, and keep me posted with stuff. And like I said before, buddy, I will help any way I can in sharing. All right, buddy. Thank you.
Cheers, mate.
No
Bye-bye.
problem.